Big Ten Media Days on the Fan are brought to you in part by Mods PDX. The future of building is here, and we're going live to Indianapolis to talk to our good friend PJ Fleck, a good friend of the show. PJ, good morning. How you doing, Coach?
I'm doing elite. How are you doing?
You're doing elite.
Wow.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. We've been saying that for 12 years, though, guys. 12 years.
Can I ask you, I know you've shared the answer to this, but I'm curious. When did row the boat start? When did it click for you, that catchphrase, row the boat?
Yeah, I'd take it back to February 9, 2011. My second son died of a heart condition. And, when you walk into a children's hospital and you know that when you come back out, you're not going to have your child, the people in that hospital change your entire life. They do. People always like, why are you so positive? Why do you have so much energy? I mean, when you see the worst day of your life and you know nothing can get worse than that, like you spend your time very differently, and you think differently, and you act differently, and you talk differently. And so and on that day I said, I wasn't a head coach yet. I was at Rutgers with Greg Schiano at the time. Mm-hmm. But I started to create something that I was going to be able to connect a community based on, my son's life who couldn't live his own life. So I was going to live it for him. And I was going to make sure when I became a head coach, I could engulf myself in the community. Everybody has something that they need to connect bigger than football. And that's where Row the Boat was created. And then I became a head coach at Western Michigan and kind of unveiled it and went 1-11. And everybody at the end of the year is like, okay, this Row the Boat thing didn't work, Coach. This never give up mantra, this everybody rowing in the right direction, same direction, just didn't work. What's next? Mow the grass? You're like, what is it? And that's what Row the Boat was all about. So basically just means never give up.
This is Minnesota head coach PJ Fleck. That's a great story. I never, Coach, heard that one, and so I appreciate you sharing that with us. I've been reading this Bill Walsh book, and there's a blurb in the book, you just reminded me of it, where he's flying back. They just lost to the Dolphins. It's his second season. He thinks he has everything set up right. They lose. They drop to 6 games under 500. He's contemplating quitting on the flight back home because he thinks he is a failure. Where did the 1-11 start, rowing the boat, being at Western Michigan? You think you're ready, you go 1-11. What did that do with your confidence? Did you contemplate stuff, and did you battle out of it, or did you never question anything?
I think when you say I never questioned anything, I think that's a complete lie. I think everybody always questions. We're human beings. We're built that way when things don't go well. But I think it just tests your fortitude. But it goes back to my upbringing. I mean, I was always the underdog. I was always the king of the twos, TOO, too young, too short, too slow. I have no connections in this profession. I played at Northern Illinois. I played for the Niners. Nobody ever thought that I'd make it. I was ranked 14 out of 14 when I got there on the depth chart. They spelled my name wrong. It was Flack on my locker, not Fleck. And I'm like, this is not going to last long. I ended up being there 2.5 years. And the reason I wear a tie on the sidelines is because Mike Nolan, who wore a coat and tie, who's an Oregon Duck, thought I'd be a great head coach and a great coach, period. And so offered me a coaching job. And like an idiot, I didn't take it. Instead, Jim Tressel called me and offered me a GA job. And so I had to contemplate both of those and went out to Ohio State and started my career with Ohio State and Jim Tressel. And so the people that changed my life and got me into coaching wore a tie. So, but I've always been that underdog and always been that king of the twos, and that's a good spot to be because you're going to go through some really, really tough times and some rocky waters, and just got to keep rowing that boat. And but after that 1-11, not only that, I was divorced. So that was a 1-11 year. I was divorced. Like, it was everything in my life was like, okay, you're not good at anything. But that's what Row the Boat was all about. And the next year we start 1-4, and we're down 20 points at halftime. I think I'm getting fired right when I get done with that game. We come back from 20 points down and win 7 straight, and the rest is history. So, I mean, we were talking about that at dinner. You either get to that point where you can flip it or you get fired. And there's one or the other. Every coach gets there.
PJ, you are clearly an excellent motivator. I'm ready to run through a brick wall right now, and it's 6:50 here on the West Coast. When you're going out and you're recruiting, are you looking for guys that are high-energy guys like yourself, or what recruits are you looking for? Are you looking for guys who have that extra chip on your shoulder? What are you pitching them to get them to go be a Gopher in Minnesota?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that players have to fit personality of the head coach. None of my players have the exact same personality as me or each other. Personality is like a fingerprint. But you have to have the same inner drive to be your best. Not the best, that's subjective. We could argue all day long who the greatest Duck of all time is. We could argue who the greatest former Portland Trailblazer was. Like, we could do all that till our face is blue. But I'm all about fit. I am not for everybody. Neither is Dan Lanning. We're no head coaches for everybody. But fit is more important in 2024 than ever. And we still get to select these kids. They get to select us. And it's more valuable than it's ever been of getting the right people inside our culture. And I'm looking for people that want to prove to themselves that they are their best every day and they're exactly who they say they are. And we've had a pretty good run of 12 years and now going on 8 years here at Minnesota of finding those right kids.
PJ Fleck, head coach of the Minnesota Gophers, joining us live from Big Ten Media Day. I'm curious, you are going into year 8. You got some transfers coming in, one of which a quarterback that I think a lot of people are hopeful for to turn the passing game around. What have you learned in the NIL space? Like when NIL becomes a thing, and I know it's just been a couple years, but talk about learning on the fly. What have you learned about yourself, how to do it at Minnesota, and how you handle portal, high school recruiting, development, keeping guys? Like, you're kind of recruiting both things, other players, your own players, all of it. What have you learned?
Well, that's a great question because there's a lot of things I've learned. One, I've learned it is okay to love where you're at. I love Minnesota. I mean, we're moving into a house that's taken us 2.5 years to build, and we love who we work for. We love where we're at because they allow me to be me. Think about that statement. My boss allows me to be myself. I think there's a lot of people who have to act like a head coach, act like the head coach, do things that maybe are outside of what and who they are. And the big word I keep using is value. You're finding out what you really value as a coach. With all the NIL, portal, collective, conference realignment, TV deals, salary caps, that's fine. That's the transactional piece now of college football. But that doesn't mean I have to be a transactional head coach. I can still be a transformational educator, mentor, teacher, life program that we've always ran and have that transactional and transformational relationship coexist. And I think that's what I've learned the most is people like in the NFL say, oh, you can't create a culture. You can't become close to the players. Some of my greatest coaches I played for them in the NFL, or when I coached in the NFL for the Buccaneers, are still those relationships with those players. I think that's a myth. I think it takes a lot of work to build relationships, and you can still do it in 2024. And I think that's what I've learned the most is we just had the best recruiting class that we've ever had. Mm-hmm. And it isn't because we had the highest NIL budget, I promise you that. And it's unique to see that we can still coexist with that transformational and now this transactional piece.
Well, it's a new conference for a lot of us out here out west and at Big Ten Media Day, but you're very familiar. Year 8, PJ Fleck, head coach of Minnesota. Coach, I was out there a couple years ago. I saw the stadium. It's a beautiful setup that you guys have out there. Thank you for hopping on with us here in Portland, man. Really good stuff. We really appreciate your energy, the sharing of stories from your lowest points to your highest points. Thank you for being a lead on the radio program. We appreciate it.
Yeah, lastly, just want to say your head coach is unbelievable. Dan is such a great man. I've had a great chance to get around him and Sophia, my wife Heather and I have, and he's a special individual that gets it in all levels. And, you guys are obviously, you already know you're in good hands, but he's such a special individual and a special coach. And look forward to playing you. I hope it's in late November in Minnesota when we do, though.
Absolutely. Thanks, Coach. All right, there we go. There is PJ Fleck live from Indianapolis. Big Ten Media Day. Gotta be honest, learned quite a bit there, some of which I don't think I was ready for, but man.
He hit it with like a 2002 Ryan Russillo, like worst year of my life, and then I turned it all around. I might be a fan of PJ Fleck. That was awesome.
I think he made me kind of a Gopher fan. I'm rooting for PJ Fleck. It's funny, we mentioned Mike Nolan with the shirt and tie. I was under the impression going into the show today we wouldn't have a guest in the 6 a.m. hour, and then it was like, hey, you're getting PJ Fleck. And I'm like, well, okay. And it's just funny we mentioned Nolan because he actually had a relationship with Mike Nolan, and so it's kind of an homage to Jim Tressel, to Mike Nolan. The other part of that is it's an interesting career these guys choose to be coaches.
Right.
That life is not easy. To hop on and tell us I'm doing elite and then follow that up with like, my kid died and I was divorced and I'm awful my first year coaching. It's like, well, that's not normally how those chain of events are said.
No.
But that was fantastic stuff from PJ Fleck.
I'll tell you right now, I'm going to try and be elite. In this
I think
commercial break, I'm going to do some push-ups. I might do some squats. I'm a PJ Fleck guy now. That was awesome.
That's a strong-willed man. No, like that's almost like the Dan Campbell feeling that I got after hearing him speak the few times.
Well, I looked at Minnesota's football reference. So last year they went to 6-7 because they lost their bowl game. 6-6 last year, somewhat disappointing for some Gopher fans.
Mm-hmm.
Year before that, 9-4, 9-4. He had 11-2 season in there. Like,
they win.
He was 5-7 and 5-7, and then 3-4 COVID year. But like, really, he's only had one subpar season. He's done pretty well.
Rowing the boat.
Well, I see why he's getting good recruits. I mean, just from
their level, yes,
right,
for them, yeah,
right, like. There's a certain cap on it, and we all know that. I mean, if you're an Oregon State, Washington State, an Arizona fan, you know that there's a cap that you have, and Minnesota clearly has that cap. But when you have a coach that can go into living rooms and fire people up, he was on this program for what, 6-7 minutes?
Something like that.
In that time, completely reverse course on him. I thought he was a little bit corny. I thought the message was a little bit funny.
That's the perception, yeah.
Now I'm buying right in. And if you can do that in 6-7 minutes with us, not even looking us in the eye, come into our house, I see why they're getting those recruits. I see why they're getting those guys with that chip on their shoulder that develop. It's very similar, obviously a different style, but back in the early 2000s, that's what Mike Riley did at Oregon State. Obviously, he's not rowing the boat. He was much more calm and a different style of message that he got across to his recruits, but they always ended up outperforming what they were. And it seems like aside from a year or two, Minnesota has been able to do that with PJ Fleck.
Almost smack dab in the middle of the conference in recruiting. They're better than Illinois, Iowa, Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State, UCLA, and Indiana. So there's PJ Fleck rowing the boat here on the Fan.